We've got a great webinar, so we're excited about this topic. This is a fun topic for me.
To me, this topic is really all about making sure that once you've found an excellent property, you're in a great market, you've got the right teams put together, and you've analyzed properties and you're ready to pull the trigger and you're purchased. Now what? You've got to make sure that the property, no matter how good it is, there's some management. Even though we talk about the income being passive, you don't have to go to work and work 8 or 10 hours a day to receive the income from real estate. But there's still management of managing the managers and then coordinating with your team. So tonight we want to talk about managing and growing your portfolio. Once you've spent the cash funds you have available for down payment, how can you continue to grow your portfolio and how do you manage your managers?
That's right. Timmy, why don't you go ahead and get it started? I think it's a good time. We'll let some more people come on as we go. Actually, you know what? Let me give a little bit of a background for Jared Garfield. Actually, Jared Garfield's been in the real estate industry for over 20 years as a real estate investor and a real estate coach. A lot of people may not be aware, but he actually used to be a Rich Dad coach years ago. He used to coach investors all over the globe, including a lot of the other coaches themselves. Jared used to have a Fox News radio show in Atlanta, Georgia. He's done real estate tours all over the country with Flip This House, Flipping Vegas, a number of different groups. And really honest, if I had to recall, Jared, before the previous recession, you were telling a lot of your investors that most of the markets they were investing in had overappreciated, and you were taking them on tours around the country to cash flowing markets and showing them where they could actually get properties that cash flowed. And that was actually before the crash. So that was a good, really, really good strategy. And I'm sure you're able to, a lot of help your investors and benefit from the timing of that, really.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, we did. And in fact, some of our investors made about 5 times through appreciation. The properties are worth about 5 times what they were when they acquired them. So that's really been great.
Wow, that's fantastic. Fantastic. Jared's got several certifications in real estate industry as well. As a graduate of Real Estate Institute, certified real estate specialist. He's a broker in Georgia and Alabama. Spends a lot of time, been working in the southeastern states for a while since this last recession. And now I've kind of moved on to the Midwest area, if I'm not correct. Tim,
yes, and we'll be able to cover some of that in future events. You'll be able to hear about some of the stuff we're also doing in the Midwest now, not just in the Southeast. Adam has been one of my best friends since he was a senior in high school. I can remember when he won the...
That's a long time ago, Jared.
It is. We're both getting a little bit of gray hair now, but I can remember when Adam had won the Georgia State Games in wrestling and he looked like a Greek god. I was at his wedding when he pulled out a chainsaw and carved ice sculptures for his bride. And so he's somebody that has a great deal of talent. He's talented across all kinds of different things. He's great with art. He's done a lot of graphic design in his early 20s and stuff like that. But he's a third generation developer, lots of background working with his family in apartments and multifamily properties. And as of the last several years, he's done a lot with land development. He's drawn out and done the CAD CAM for software for subdivisions. He's helped with a project in California and as well as in Colorado Springs, 800-acre development that's a large equestrian community. He's got an equestrian community in Georgia. He's got some land development projects going on in Florida right now. So Adam's very experienced when it comes to land development and subdivisions, as well as apartment complex. As he continued to grow, he's always been very passionate about learning and knowledge ever since I've known him. I remember one of the things my wife teases him about a little bit is I thought it was really cool when he was in high school. He said he wanted to be a Renaissance man, and that was part of the reasons why he had studied a lot and perfected his skills in art, and he liked architecture and stuff like that and CAD CAM design. But he's continued to always be hungry to learn. He's got a certified commercial investment member designation, which is the most prestigious designation you can have in commercial real estate. So that's impressive.
Jared, you're the one person that can do my introduction without even looking at my bio. I'm sure 2/3 of that was not even on the bio, but I appreciate the compliments.
Well, there's even more. He was a nationally ranked submission fighter at one point. So even though I'm his senior and I'm a lot
Tim, you better turn the slide really quick.
But anyway, so he's got a lot of background, lots of designations, and he also has been involved with financial planning and worked with Transamerica Financial Advisors. So he understands the security side of it. So it gives him a very good background for running hedge funds, which he's done. He's run some hedge funds, and the two of us together sold about $70 million in real estate to most of Wall Street's major hedge funds that were buying real estate in the Atlanta area.
That's right. Table of contents. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about how to manage your property portfolio. We're going to talk about tips and strategies on how to grow that portfolio. And so that's kind of what we're focused on. Like Jared said a little bit earlier, now we're actually buying properties and we've started buying properties. What do we do next?
So the first thing is managing your property manager. We teach in our coaching program, when we really get into depth, the questions that you really need to know to ask the property managers. But it's important that you receive good reporting from your property managers. And if you don't receive it immediately, you've got to follow up with them to make sure that they're getting these reports to you consistently on a timely manner. And these reports should include your monthly P&L statement, your profit and loss statement. This should show the income coming in. It should show expenses coming out, things like repairs. And then also there should be a tenant receivables report. You need to know when the tenants are paying. Are they paying on time or are they paying late? And is the property manager collecting the late fees? One of the important questions to ask your property managers: who gets to keep the late fees? Do you get to participate in it, or do they give all of the late fees to you? Or are they going to split it, since they have to put some effort into collecting those late fees? Those should come in a tenant receivables report. You've got an accounts payable report. They're going to be able to show things that you might need to pay out if repairs have been done. And then there's bank reconciliation reports. If the property manager has a checking account for the properties, you just want to make sure that you're receiving the money appropriately. And then the last thing is the bank statement. You're going to get a copy of the bank statement. So these are the types of things that you want to be able to see from your property manager.
And it's interesting, Jared, and I'm guarantee you that a lot of people are getting a lot of different reports from their property management teams. And it's important for people to remember, and we talk about this all the time, real estate investing, if you're buying direct, is not passive. Even if you have a property management team and teams in place on the ground, you still have to manage those teams. One of the reports that I think people are probably most familiar with is the owner report, just the owner statement that talks about how much money was collected that month and what kind of expenses came out. And I think one of the things that a lot of people miss is they wait until this report comes out and they wait to see what happens and do they get a check or not and what's going on with the property. And in reality, one of the things that you can do is the moment that rents are, so typically rents are due, I guess, around maybe on the 1st or the 5th or whatever the time that the property manager is designated that rents are late. That's when you can come in the beginning, get a delinquency report, right? Like early on. So really within the first 2 weeks of the month, you can get a delinquency report from the property management company that shows which of your tenants have paid and which of your tenants haven't paid yet. And then, so you can kind of at least start the process of figuring out what's going on and trying to work on getting those rents collected. And then from there, you can take your owner statement and see what happens. And then you've also got, like Jared mentioned before, bank account reconciliation. So we've got one of the funds, it's a single family fund that we manage. We really rely on not just the owner statement, but a delinquency report, as well as the bank account reconciliation, the financials that come in. So we can see what's coming to the bank account, what's come out of the bank account. And those are all very important tools that you look at on a regular basis, really to kind of get a little bit of ahead of your portfolio.
One of the things I'd say too is I have a good friend that had a property manager that was embezzling money. And unfortunately, he wasn't receiving these reports. And then he comes to me, he's like, well, I just realized my property manager owes me about $15,000 because he had multiple properties and some of them were multifamily. And he's like, he told me that the money's gone and he doesn't have it and he can't pay me. And so I had to go through all the steps of what I could do to collect it. And he had to get some threatening letters written from attorneys. But the bottom line is this guy had done stuff that would probably put him in jail. And I'm guessing that if it was happening to my friend, it was probably happening across the board to many of his property management clients. So I like what Ronald Reagan said, since tonight is election night, and that was trust but verify. And these statements are your best way to verify the information that your property managers are telling you. So make sure that you're getting these reports.
Next slide, please.
So
growth strategies. Excellent. 1031 exchanges, refinance. We're going to talk about principal pay down, and we're going to talk about growing and saving capital as well.
A lot of what we want to try and do as a real estate investor is, once we've used up our capital, we want to know the different avenues that are available for us to be able to expand and grow our wealth. Because the more tenants I have paying down the principal on my property, and the more homes I have appreciating while I take advantage of leveraging other people's money, the greater wealth I'm going to build over a 10 or 15 or 20-year period. It can be extremely significant. And 1031 exchanges is one of the best ways to be able to do that, because you're able to take the gains from another property and usually roll it into sometimes double the number of properties that you did own. So you're now getting more principal pay down, you're getting more appreciation, and getting more assets as well. So there's 4 different types of exchanges we want to talk about tonight. One is a simultaneous exchange, which occurs when the replacement property is relinquished and closes the same day. And that's quite common. But next is the reverse exchange, which happens when more rarely, and that's when the property that you're going to purchase is kind of obtained in advance and under contract, and you're putting that in as a title holder first, while you're exchanging the property that you currently own, and then getting the funds to be able to purchase that property that you've found.
Yeah, Jared, there's also a delayed exchange. And I think this is probably the most common one that most people are familiar with. And that occurs with when the exchanger relinquishes their original property before they acquire a replacement property. And that's what most people end up using 1031 exchanges for today. It's probably the most common. You sell the property and you've got a period in which you can identify a new property, a replacement property. There's also a construction or improvement exchange, which allows taxpayers to make improvements on the replacement property by using the exchange equity. So in reality, there's actually multiple ways that you can do a 1031 exchange. And if you understand how those work, you can apply those strategies.
And that last one, the construction improvement exchange, that might be more if you're going into an opportunity zone, because sometimes you can then really have some great tax advantages. And so you might be picking up a property that's pre-renovation and then be able to really benefit by participating in an opportunity zone sometimes. And that's when you might use a construction or an improvement exchange. They're a little bit more pricey because you have to cut checks, every time that the work is done. And so the exchange intermediaries will charge a little bit more for that type of exchange. But that gives you a good feel for what's out there when it comes to 1031 exchanges. We love this strategy for being able to get a lot more property. So if you own a property that you bought in the past, and you've had it for 5 or 10 years and you've got some pretty good appreciation, it might be a good time if the market cycle has gone up a lot and you're in an expansion market, you think you can sell very quickly for top dollar. It might be better to exchange into a property, into a market that has lots more upside potential because it hasn't really gone up yet, and get more properties.
Strategies for refinancing. Now, there's, when it comes to refinancing, it's really just you're recapitalizing. And oftentimes you'll come in and decide to purchase real estate with cash. Maybe you'll purchase it with a credit line. But ultimately, when you're looking at holding something long-term, or you want to reduce the amount of interest or recapitalize, that's when you're going to come in and look at refinancing. So Jared, let's go ahead. You want to go start down the left side?
Yeah, that'll be fine. I'll cover that. We had a question that came in, and that was RC said that he has a property management team, and he wanted to know what's common as to who receives the late fees. And what I typed into the message thing here is it really varies on the property manager, and it's something you're going to need to negotiate. It's going to be found in your management agreement, so you'll want to pay attention to that. But late fees typically are, some property managers will divide them, where they keep part and you get part. and they argue that it takes them more time and effort, and so they want to be able to pay the manpower to collect it. Others will let you have all of it, and then some of them actually keep all of it. So you need to negotiate that.
It is, and you'd be surprised when you look at the details. If you talk to different property management companies, you're going to see a few, minor differences, and sometimes it's the differences make all the difference, especially when it comes to fees, what they charge and what they allow you to make on the property.
So on the topic of refinancing, there's several strategies to be able to build wealth quicker in real estate, or more quickly. The first is, if you want to get rid of your debt faster, what you might consider is potentially going to a shorter loan term. So if you're at a 30-year amortization, you could go to a 20-year amortization. And if you were to do that, you would obviously pay it off a lot sooner. If your retirement horizon is coming up quicker, that might be something you might consider. So going to a shorter loan term than you currently have. Sometimes that also lowers your interest rate considerably. So if interest rates are at a higher time, it's not as big of a gap right now when interest rates are so low. But when interest rates are really high, that can be a nice strategy. The next thing to consider is when rates drop to a really low rate like they are now, the real estate investing is such a better gig right now because interest rates are so historically low. So you want to be able to lock in a fixed rate for as long as you can. And so that means that you're going to have a lot of savings, because as rates go up, you're going to have your mortgage is geared better being at a lower rate. And so you're going to make more cash flow because rates are so low. And it doesn't look like rates are very likely to drop anytime soon. So now's a great time to get into real estate investing, or to refinance properties that you bought 4 or 5 years ago where interest rates were at 4% or 5%, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. If you have properties that are at 7 or 8%, because they're usually higher than traditional owner occupant loans, now's a great time to refinance those. And then of course, the last thing is you can refinance to increase your cash flow. So if you hadn't gotten the better rates, make sure that you do that, because it's going to be a big difference in your monthly savings, and your cash flow could be a lot better by refinancing.
Yeah, it will. And a lot of times when people look at financing, they focus on the longest amortization schedule, the lowest interest rate, and ultimately try to get the maximum amount of leverage. That's not always the best strategy to take. And so just want you to open your mind and consider other options. So one way to improve cash flow is to reduce payments with lower interest rate, like we talked about. If you can get a lower interest rate and reduce the monthly payments, that makes a very big difference. And what happens oftentimes when we buy a property and we need to renovate that property, we're going to get a renovation loan, or we're going to use a line of credit to do the acquisition and do the construction. That's typically going to be a little bit more expensive. Could be anywhere from 7, 8, 9%. And I know there's, sometimes some people out there pay more than that, but 8 or 9% is pretty standard for a renovation loan. And then once a property has been improved, once a tenant has been put into place and the property is bringing in rent, then you can refinance at a much lower interest rate. Paying off your debt, for example, like a cash out refinance could mean consolidating debt. And a cash out refi, you can also use money to increase assets as and your cash flow. So ultimately, there's a number of different reasons to refinance. But for example, in the apartment industry or in a build to rent type of community, for example, we've got an apartment building that we're renovating right now. And so we'll spend the next probably 18 to 24 months renovating all the units as they come vacant. We'll renovate it and update it, and then we'll increase the rents and lease it up. And we'll keep doing that as those units turn over. So once all that renovation and construction's done, then we're going to refinance, because now we've got an asset that, in the case of a single family home, it's bringing in rent, or the case of a multifamily, it's either bringing in rent or bringing in more rent than it was before, which when it comes to income properties, they're valued by the amount of income that it brings in. And so now you can refinance and pull some of your capital back out. You've got the new value. If you renovate a property, or if you build a property on a vacant lot, now you've got something that was more valuable than when you started. And so now you've completed the renovation, or you've done the value add, and you can refinance typically out at a higher valuation than when you originally purchased the property. and also the risk of doing the renovation and the risk of hoping that it'll rent out. All that's been done, and so you can get a lower interest rate now. Next slide, please. Principal pay down. This one's really important, and really a lot of people don't think about in today's day and age. They don't think about paying off their principal early. But I will tell you, Jared mentioned one thing on the last slide about getting a 15-year mortgage as opposed to a 30-year mortgage. A lot of people don't consider paying off their mortgage. They say, hey, I want to have leverage. I want to have a mortgage. But paying down the principal balance on your debt is an important part of your strategy, and it's an important part of real estate, right? So there's a number of different ways to do that. And biweekly payments is one way. You can make additional payments. You can refinance. Again, what we talked about before, getting a lower interest rate. You can also refinance to a shorter term loan to get it paid off more quickly. Paying extra for just the principal each month is another way. And again, why would people do that? If you think about it, when you do the math, and we've got some software that really shows us what happens over a long period of time with the property, but when you take into consideration the appreciation of a property and the principal pay down, that's your net worth growing. As the property increases in value, as the mortgage gets paid down, your net worth grows and your risk goes down. So ultimately, we don't try to get max out the mortgage just so that we can get a higher cash on cash return. Oftentimes we'll get a lower mortgage because it means reduced risk. And so you need to consider that as well, that having a lot of debt and a lot of leverage can be beneficial, but it can also be highly risky. Jared, do you have any thoughts on that? Okay. That would be a no. Tim, you want to go on to the next slide? Strategies for growing and saving capital.
Sorry, Adam, I didn't realize I was on mute there. I was talking. I was saying I love the principle on multifamily properties to have go ahead and pay.
Let's go back a little bit then, Timmy. I apologize about that.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
I was talking away, didn't realize I was on mute. So I was just saying that I do like this part that you closed out with about having tenants pay weekly. Normally property managers aren't going to want to deal with that, but if you're dealing with any lower end type properties, or particularly on multifamily properties, sometimes if you have a duplex or a fourplex, you may have a tenant that would prefer to pay weekly. And if they do, it does amount to a full extra payment per year. And so if you're applying that directly towards the principal, it can be pretty exciting.
Strategies for growing and saving capital. Short-term buy and hold rentals. The strategy also often involves buying and holding rental properties for short periods of time, usually 1 to 5 years. And also there's long-term buying and holding rentals, which some benefits include rental income, tax shelter from depreciation, expenses, amortization of loan, and appreciation. So ultimately, real estate is just a tool, and there's no one great way to invest in real estate, whether it's be short-term or long-term. I will say from an asset appreciation standpoint, holding real estate in general tends to work out really well. Now, holding real estate that doesn't appreciate or doesn't cash flow well does not work really well. But if you've got a good property and you can hold on to it for a while, you usually not ever regret that.
And I would point out here too, when you talk about short-term buy and holds, so it's typically normally 1 to 5 years. I mean, I might hold a flip for 1 year so that I can get the 1031 exchange value, or at least not pay capital gains rate instead of income tax rate. But typically, if you only hold a property for 1 year, by the time you pay commissions and on selling the property, as well as some closing costs, it's really hard to make a profit if you only hold for 1 year. But there are a lot of times where I like to hold for only 5 years instead of 30. And that's because if I can time the market cycle right and buy low and sell high, I never mind taking a property and selling it when I buy it turnkey and it has new roofs and new hot water heaters and new furnaces and new condensing units. Once those are 5 or 7 years old, I know I can sell the property and nobody's concerned about any of the major systems. Nobody's going to beat me up on my price. And if I do sell at 5 or 7 or 10 years, I know that I'm passing those deferred maintenance costs onto the next buyer, and I'm not going to incur those. So if I can exchange after 5 to 7 years and go into either a nicer asset class or into a market that I think is going to have a lot greater appreciation, I like that strategy with my buy and hold rentals. I'm not always holding for 30 years. And I think this rental debt snowball plan, I don't mind diving a little bit deeper into that. And the idea behind that is saving your cash flow, not going out and buying a new boat, but saying, okay, instead of increasing my lifestyle, I'm saving the cash for down payments. Because if I have 5 or 6 rentals and I'm pulling in $300 a month cash flow, well, 5 rentals is $1,500 a month. Well, that's $18,000 a year, which is enough in many of our markets to have almost a down payment for one more property. So saving my cash flow for additional down payments, or potentially taking all that cash flow and applying it towards one of my rental properties to have it completely paid off. I don't think that makes sense in such a low interest rate environment, but there are times where that might work well, depending on the market cycle or what your objectives are. And so there's a lot of different things here, but I just think that these are some good points that a lot of people don't talk about.
Now we're at the question and answer portion, and Timmy, actually go on to the next slide. We're gonna answer some questions if you guys have some questions, but I also want to take a couple minutes now that we've got to the end of this presentation to maybe cover a couple of things that we didn't mention from a portfolio management standpoint. We've got Jared and I both have portfolios across a number of different states that we're managing and growing, and you probably have a number of portfolios as well. One thing that we talk about a lot is really when you're just getting started is just sometimes start small, pick up a property. And a lot of people, I know that they like to buy and sell or flip properties, but when you can hold a property and rent it out, it's a great opportunity. And if you can kind of continue to do that for a while, I know we talked to some people that are, I guess, that are younger, and maybe they're buying their first home, and instead of buying a really nice home, buy a smaller home and move a little bit more often and buy another smaller home. And if you do that 2 or 3 or 4 times, you end up starting to grow a portfolio of rental properties. And so often, Jared, I don't know if the same case with you, but so if we have a portfolio, once we start building up a number of properties, we'll each year probably sell some and buy a few more, and then sell some that we feel like maybe aren't performing very well and replace those with some better properties. And the ones that are performing well, keep those. But ultimately, managing a real estate portfolio just takes a lot of time. It just takes time. It takes focus. Like anything else, to do anything well, it takes some of your attention and it takes some of your focus.
And a lot of it's about identifying the type of assets that you want to own. A lot of people get involved with C+ properties because they're so much more affordable. Your down payment, if you only have 100,000 or so to put down, your down payment goes a lot further, which means that you get a lot more monthly cash flow. And when you multiply it times 5 properties instead of 1 or 2, if you were to buy A-class or B-class properties, you're able to build up your cash flow and your savings better. And particularly if you're buying in transitional neighborhoods where those C properties might turn into B or even B+ assets over a 10-year period, then you can sometimes do better buying the C-class assets that you renovate to become B or B+ if you're in an area where the neighborhoods are rapidly gentrifying. So it's important to understand what type of asset classes you have, what the neighborhoods are doing. Are they gentrifying, or are they trending downwardly? All of those things affect, what you decide to do. Your time horizon for retirement is important. Some people, if I'm a doctor or an attorney or anything that's a high income profession, I might not want C-class assets. I might want B+ and A-class assets because I don't want to add to my management headache. And so all of those things need to be thought of very closely.
Yeah, and if you think about the time horizon, if someone's getting ready to retire and they need as much cash flow as possible, maybe they want to look at C+ or B- assets. And if someone is looking, maybe they just want to continue to build their net worth and they want assets that are going to appreciate more, maybe they'll look at maybe B+ or A- assets in different markets. Jared, I think it's interesting that you and I have, even though we both have are success, have what we feel like are successful real estate portfolios, our strategies are very different. If you think about it, most of what, so if we, and we talk about this all the time, what should you invest in today, right? What's working? Because the type of investments are different depending on the market you're investing in and depending on just the current, where we're at in the market cycle today. For example, most of the markets that I focus on happen to be high growth markets, focusing more on new construction product. And now we're looking at some other Airbnb product as well. And Jared, and you focused really on markets that aren't high growth markets, that are just stable markets or slightly declining and have fantastic cash flow. So
Well,
you're picking up properties.
We've done a lot of both, because you know I got into Atlanta early on when I thought Atlanta was the top market in the country to rebound, and we were buying 2007 houses for 35,000 in B and B plus neighborhoods that went on to sell for 215,000, you know, 10 years later. And then Huntsville really was a high growth market. That one's really appreciated well and stuff like that. But we also do like some of the blue collar working class markets, but we carefully choose those because like we're doing a lot in South Bend and Mishawaka right now. But there's tons of resurgence, tons of renovation going on. And so there's a lot of new development and a lot of gentrification going on, but that has historically been a blue collar kind of just stagnant market. But we're just getting incredible returns on duplexes and fourplexes that are often in B to B minus neighborhoods that are mostly single family neighborhoods. But we can pick up, for instance, we got a fourplex for 65,000 that we did a major renovation on. It's bringing in $3,000 a month. And we were able to get that to a client for $245,000 with it bringing in $3,000 a month with basically everything brand new. So there are a lot of different strategies, and between the two of us, Adam, we can bring all of the different strategies to work for our clientele.
Yeah, that's right. I just think it's interesting that you don't have to have just one strategy, and ultimately there's a lot of different approaches you can take to real estate investing, and there's no one approach which is the best approach. I will say one of the best approaches to take is the one that you're most familiar with, that you have the greatest potential or capability of executing, is probably going to be the best strategy for you to take. And that depends on your experience and your location and your access to good teams. Again, if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to throw out some questions. We'd be glad to answer them about portfolios or about any kind of investing in general. You'll notice that there's some QR codes on the screen. You can actually take your phone and you can take your camera and hover it over those QR codes, and it will pull up a Calendly. You can schedule a call with Doyle if you're interested in single family homes, any of the markets that we're in. If you are interested in anything outside of that, or discussion, you're welcome to schedule a call with me. And if you're interested in learning more about real estate coaching, as you can see, as do these webinars, Jared has tremendous amount of content to share. Jared's been a real estate coach for many, many years. He's got a coaching program, and he's glad to help anyone that wants to expand their knowledge and their capability, help move forward on your real estate investing ventures quicker. I definitely recommend spending some time with Jared.
Well, thanks, Adam. We like to be able to assist clients, and it's not really a money-making thing for us. We don't really even cover our cost of time in the program, but we like the ability to spend an hour a week with a small group and help them analyze and choose the very best deals and learn everything from market selection and market cycles all the way through to analyzing properties and picking the teams and different things. So there are a lot of good options. So our HELOCs, the question just came up from Eddie Lovick. He says, are HELOCs available on investment properties during the season of COVID? Yes, it depends on the bank, and it depends on whether they're portfolioing the loans. But it also depends on how much equity you have. But a lot of banks, if you have significant equity, are open to doing HELOCs. It's just a matter of talking to the individual banks and seeing who would do that. A lot of people also do portfolio loans, and that's something I've seen a lot of, where they'll actually loan against the whole portfolio. and that might even be easier if you have significant equity.
And you'll find also there's private capital out there that'll do cross collateralization if it's something that you need, if it's necessary and you need capital for, you know, a short-term capital for particular reasons, maybe a renovation or project that you need to get more equity or capital for. They'll actually do cross collateralization if you have equity in other projects. So there's a lot of private lenders that do things like that as well. So you can get really creative. Obviously, it's going to be less expensive if you can go to the bank and get a HELOC, or usually just bank financing in general is less expensive. But at the same time, banks are going to be, you know, not as flexible if there's a reason that you need some flexibility in the capital that you're looking for.
But glad you joined us all tonight. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll all go back and watch the returns on the election and see what happens here tonight. It's an exciting time in America at election time, and we'll look forward to seeing the results. We look forward to getting to know you better. If there's a way that we can help you, please reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jared. Thank you for your time. Timmy, thank you for your time. Everyone that attended tonight, we really appreciate your dedication toward your real estate education. And if you're watching this video after the fact, you're welcome to reach out to us and ask us some questions. We'd love to help you along your journey in real estate investing.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you, Timmy.